Tonight, an application to have a Northern Territory police officer's murder trial moved from Alice Springs to Darwin. Also tonight, when domestic violence is too close to home, one Territory politician reveals her experience. The government cancels the citizenship of an Australian terrorist who plotted to bomb the MCG. And the supercars returning to Darwin in 2021, with the super bikes coming along for the ride. Good evening, Eleni Roussos with ABC News. Lawyers for the Northern Territory police officer charged with the murder of 19-year-old Kumanjai Walker have made an application to have the officer's trial moved from Alice Springs to Darwin. In his first appearance in the Supreme Court today, Constable Zachary Rolfe's trial dates were also set for the middle of next year.
With the accused appearing over the phone from Canberra, Constable Zachary Rolfe's defence team fronted the Supreme Court in Alice Springs for the first time since the officer was committed to stand trial for murder last month. His defence barrister, David Edwardson QC, made an application to have the trial moved from Central Australia to Darwin, more than 1,500 kilometres from the town of Yuendamu, where Kumanjai Walker was allegedly shot dead.
Can you tell us why you're making an application to have the proceedings moved to Darwin?
Unfortunately, I can't because it's suppressed.
All written documents in support of the application have been suppressed from publication until after the trial judge has made a decision. Crown prosecutors indicated they will oppose the move to have the trial held in Darwin.
The decision on where the trial will ultimately be run will be up to the trial judge, who at this stage is Acting Justice Dean Mildren. A hearing has been set for December 11 in Darwin, where the judge will hear submissions from both sides. A link will be set up to hear at the Alice Springs Supreme Court so family and community members can listen to proceedings.
Constable Rolfe is expected to face a 5-week trial beginning on the 19th of July next year, more than a year and a half after 19-year-old Kumanjai Walker died in Yuendamu. Constable Rolfe will appear on the next occasion over the phone from Canberra, where he's currently on bail, suspended on pay from the police force. Melissa McKay, ABC News, Alice Springs.
The Indigenous Australians Minister was in Darwin last night speaking to Aboriginal leaders about remote housing. Ken Wyatt's draft speech was critical of the Territory Government's progress on building remote homes, labelling it a disgrace. But the speech ended up making was massively toned down, saying after a meeting with NT Cabinet members, he had more confidence in their plan to get homes built faster.
More than 100 Aboriginal leaders turned out last night to hear from the Indigenous Australians Minister. They were expecting a scathing review of the NT government's progress in building more homes in remote areas after reading Ken Wyatt's draft speech. But gone were the words disgraceful and unacceptable. Instead, he told the audience,
"The Northern Territory's rollout of these houses has been slow, and in discussions today, there is a strong commitment to accelerate that work."
The Territory Government has faced criticism over its slow rollout of remote homes since committing $1.1 billion to housing 3 years ago.
There's been a lot of layers of bureaucracy, and that has to go. And we need to look at how do we get procurement, how do we get the rollout of those houses working.
The Chief Minister admitted the rollout of houses has been slow, and it's been a challenge recruiting locals in remote areas. He says it will be accelerated. And that satisfied Ken Wyatt, who met with government members before his speech.
We had a discussion around housing, and they will now escalate activity.
Exactly what changes, if any, to help ramp up the construction of homes is unclear. Neither the Territory or Federal Government will elaborate on details of their meeting. This month, a review into the NT's housing program is due, and if it falls short, the Commonwealth could withhold future funding. Minister Wyatt says he's still open to giving the funding to land councils rather than the NT government. Suwaiba Hanifi, ABC News.
Unions are calling for an urgent audit of electrical wires and installation after revelations an electrical fault contributed to the death of an 11-year-old boy in the West Arnhem Land community of Goombalanya last month. They say similar faults could exist across other remote communities and in the major centres.
The community of Gombolania is still in mourning after the death of an 11-year-old boy last month. NT's work safety watchdog this week revealed an electrical fault contributed to the child's death.
It was an accident waiting to happen.
NT WorkSafe released these images showing how a damaged power line connected to a roof, sending 240 volts of electricity through the structure. It's believed the child was climbing into an external area of the home when he died. Unions say it can't be allowed to happen again.
And they need to get out to these communities and look at them all and ensure there's no other faults lying there where people can come into contact with live electricity. Then off the pole, there's a service that goes to a house.
Yep. Tracing through the issues of wiring and installation, the unions called on government to properly fund NT WorkSafe to carry out rolling audits territory-wide and for incentives for homeowners to check their installation is safe.
And there's strong criticism of how the public safety alert warning of the risks to homeowners, residents and electrical contractors was managed, with even power and water contractors unaware of it when unions contacted them this morning.
And no one's aware. It could be sitting there waiting for the same thing could be sitting there right now that could have been addressed already.
Power and Water says it's started inspections into electrical supply installations in remote areas to assess and rectify any issues found. Police investigations are continuing into the child's death. Letitia Lemke, ABC News.
Northern Territory Police are concerned for the welfare of a man who went missing at Kings Canyon on the weekend. 41-year-old Timothy Rodwell reportedly walked into bushland at the Kings Canyon Resort after an altercation with another person on Sunday night. He was last seen wearing a T-shirt like this. It's unclear if he had access to any water or food. Police spent this afternoon coordinating a land and air search of the area. The Northern Territory's Police Commissioner has laid bare the realities of working on the front line of domestic violence in the Territory at a breakfast in Darwin. The event was attended by a broad range of people in the sector, with one Territory politician revealing her own experience with family violence.
It's been 3 years since the No More Violence breakfast event was held in Darwin, but on its return, it put the spotlight on the Territory's staggering rates of assault.
It is abhorrent. It is a national shame. And yet none of you see this being reported on.
The event saw one Northern Territory politician reveal her own experiences with an abusive ex-partner taking her children away from her.
The price that I had to pay for getting my children back was to stay with him under force, behave as a wife, and get them back only when I behaved in a family way. Fortunately, after a week, a family member brought them back to me. They felt guilty, only for him to assault me in front of them as we fled to the bus stop.
The Northern Territory continues to have the highest rate of domestic violence in Australia. This year, police say there was a sharp rise in assaults caused by an increase in Centrelink payments and the lifting of border restrictions. Police say there were 25,000 reports of assault last year. Of those, just over 4,000 were domestic related, and 73% of the victims of those assaults were Aboriginal women. But one domestic violence survivor says domestic and family violence is much more pervasive.
Well, I think family violence isn't about the Indigenous community or any other ethnicity. I think family violence happens all around us in all ethnic groups, and I think it's just raising awareness and how unacceptable it is.
A scourge plaguing the Territory at all levels. Diana Damjanovic, ABC News.
And if this story has raised any issues for you, you can get help by calling the National Sexual Assault and Family Violence Counselling Helpline 1800 RESPECT, which is 1800 737 732. One of this country's most notorious terrorists has become the first person in Australia to be stripped of their citizenship under counter-terrorism laws. Abdul Nasser Ben Brika was sentenced to 15 years jail for masterminding plots to attack targets, including the MCG. The Algerian-born cleric was due to be released from prison this month. Instead, he now faces deportation. Political editor Andrew Probyn explains.
Osama bin Laden, he's a great man.
Firebrand cleric Abdul Nasser Ben Brika was of interest to Australian security agencies long before his arrest.
I don't accept all other religion except religion of Islam. Allah.
Ben Brika's radical jihadist ideology prompted ASIO to raid his Melbourne home in 2005.
They search in my garage, as you can see.
Convicted of being both ringleader and member of a terrorist organisation.
They take just some papers.
He was sentenced to 15 years prison in 2008 for plotting terror attacks on Crown Casino and a packed MCG on Grand Final day. Ben Brika was scheduled for release earlier this month. That was extended until next month as the federal government scrambled to keep the 60-year-old behind bars.
He'll remain in prison whilst an interim detention order is in force, pending the court's consideration of the application for a continuing detention order.
But the Home Affairs Minister is taking out some insurance.
I cancelled the Australian citizenship of convicted terrorist Abdul Nasser Ben Brika. He's the first individual to have lost his citizenship on shore.
Even from jail, Ben Brika's malevolent influence has been of concern. Notorious Islamic State terrorist Khaled Sharif was one of his followers.
We did understand when we passed those laws through the Parliament that the cancellation of citizenship was a big step, but a necessary step in certain circumstances.
He may not ever come back to Australia physically, but he can certainly enter via the digital realm.
Peter Dutton today revealed 20 other dual nationals have been stripped of their Australian citizenship due to terrorist activity, but they've all been overseas. Ben Brika will eventually face deportation to Algeria, his birthplace, even though he's spent more than half his life in Australia. He won't be missed, but his case does invite the question, will the world be safer if Australia exports one of its problems? Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
The transition of power in the United States is underway, with President-elect Joe Biden given approval to access crucial national security information. Donald Trump continues to defy custom, refusing to concede, and US media say he's now planning to pardon former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. But as North America correspondent David Lipson reports, his focus today has been on a more traditional pardon.
And now it's time for the moment of our guest of honour.
The White House diary is suddenly clear, and Donald Trump has presidential pardons on his mind.
I hereby grant you a full pardon.
The pre-Thanksgiving tradition this year concluded on a more serious note.
Will you be issuing a pardon for yourself?
Well, good afternoon, everyone.
President-elect Joe Biden welcomed his cabinet nominees onto the stage with a message for the world.
America is back, ready to lead the world, not retreat from it. Once again, sit at the head of the table.
America's most pressing issue remains the coronavirus pandemic, still exploding across the country. Officials are now coordinating with the Biden transition team as they prepare to distribute 6 million doses of the Pfizer vaccine within weeks, 40 million by the end of the year.
We will ensure coordinated briefings with them to ensure they're getting whatever information that they feel they need.
Across the country, food lines are getting longer. Thanksgiving is taking on new meaning for all walks of life.
The Meadowlands YMCA is located in one of the wealthiest counties in the country, and the need continues to grow.
So does the stock market. The Dow breaking through 30,000 points for the first time amid signs of a peaceful transfer of power. In a hastily prepared press conference, the president tried to claim credit.
I just want to congratulate all the people within the administration that worked so hard.
The White House has now given approval for Joe Biden to start receiving the presidential daily briefs of classified intelligence reports. The president-elect says he's pleased that the transition process has finally begun, but America's problems will soon be his. David Lipson, ABC News, Washington.
Still to come this hour, the Australian businesses stung by China's trade ban.
It's fairly devastating to wake up one morning and you haven't got a market, no export market.
The relationship has never been in a worse state than it is today.
It's just been a tough year for everybody, and this is a bit of a nail in the coffin, really.
Plus, why Clive Palmer faces a multi-million-dollar legal bill. That's coming up.
A further 2 cases of coronavirus have been picked up in repatriated Australians at the Howard Springs quarantine facility. The 64-year-old female and 59-year-old man arrived in Darwin on a flight from New Delhi yesterday. They've been placed in isolation at the facility. Since repatriation flights to Darwin began last month, 16 people have tested positive to COVID. South Australia's Medi hotel system will be overhauled after it was revealed 2 returning Australians caught COVID-19 while they were in quarantine, as Stacey Lee reports.
A snapshot of life inside the Peppers Medi Hotel.
Very fortunate to have a balcony to get some fresh air.
Stephen Eleni has been in this room for more than 2 weeks and still doesn't know if or when he'll get out.
All the guests have tested negative twice or 3 times. So, you know, we don't have the virus. The only virus that's coming into this place is from the outside. So why would you keep us in here and keep risking our safety?
Around 500 hours of CCTV at Peppers is now being reviewed as authorities try to work out how a couple from Nepal caught COVID while in quarantine at the hotel.
That's going to be important to look at that in real time about when somebody might have touched their mask, for example, and when they might have touched another surface.
So far, the video's shown the first person infected at the hotel was a security guard and not a cleaner as originally suspected. And there's no evidence of staff being in travellers' rooms.
Nobody was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I think that is the most important thing.
To try and prevent this from happening again, the South Australian government has announced an overhaul of the state's Medi hotel system. Step 1 will be to move all positive COVID cases into a dedicated COVID hospital. The government is considering recommissioning a recently closed private hospital to do it. The new facility will be monitored by police and protective security officers who won't be allowed to work in other high-risk jobs,
including correctional facilities, hospitals and aged care facilities.
The government will also ask National Cabinet to consider making it a requirement for all returning Australians to produce a negative COVID test before boarding a flight home, but that will require a global approach.
Getting a cooperation internationally may be a little more difficult.
A difficult request for a difficult situation. Stacey Lee, ABC News, Adelaide.
Would you be willing to hand over personal information about your race or ethnicity if it helped authorities better tailor their response to the pandemic? That could soon be a reality, with the federal government considering recording these details when a person gets a COVID test. Political reporter Stephanie Dalzell has this exclusive story.
Inside your nose and mouth is a goldmine of information for health authorities.
Hi, how you going?
But a vital part of the pandemic puzzle isn't being recorded in these testing queues, and that's a person's race or ethnicity.
It's important to know if particular groups are being affected badly. It's important to know if some groups are being missed out in the testing regime.
The Health Department has confirmed it's actively considering recording a person's cultural and linguistic diversity when they get a COVID-19 test.
Hey.
The information will help officials better target resources, adjust tracing strategies and improve engagement with community leaders.
Go get tested.
This is an opportunity for systems and for health service providers to be more creative in the ways they're engaging.
Would you be comfortable handing over that information?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind here.
I don't want an infection, of course, so I don't mind to be asked.
I'm mixed feelings.
There's no problem with that, I think.
The COVID-19 risk is greater for ethnic minorities because they're more likely to have a chronic illness and less likely to interact with public health messages.
Salam alaikum.
And during the pandemic, governments have come under fire over their engagement with multicultural communities, including poor translations. In Melbourne's outer suburbs, the first outbreaks of the second wave were in culturally diverse suburbs.
I think perhaps we would have done better in some of the situations in Victoria and Melbourne in particular if we'd been collecting this data early on.
Few countries have gathered information along ethnic or racial lines, and there are concerns about whether, in the wrong hands, it could be used to racially vilify sections of the community. But those pushing for this data say health inequalities will only be tackled once they're statistically visible. Stephanie Dalzell, ABC News, Canberra.
The reopening of state and territory borders has injected some optimism back into the travel industry. Share prices are rebounding as bookings soar, but some tourists are worried their plans could be ruined by any further coronavirus outbreaks. Emilia Terzon reports.
Around Australia, people are booking flights again.
My family are on the Gold Coast, and obviously I've been kind of stuck in Melbourne, so yeah, missing them desperately and excited to get back and see them.
Several travel websites are breaking sales records as border restrictions are removed.
Way more expensive than I remember. It has been a while since I've obviously been to the airport, but looking at like a couple of $100 at least each way to the Goldie.
Shares in Flight Centre and Qantas are taking off, heading back to pre-COVID levels. Tourism operators are also hoping a wave of domestic travellers will head their way soon, but unlike stock market investors, they're cautious.
The next month or two will really paint the big picture of where we're at.
While domestic tourism can return to Australia's surf destinations just in time for summer, it's a very different world. Borders could open or close due to outbreaks, making it difficult for people to plan, especially if they're worried about cancellation. Jess had to call off several trips this year. She's now wary of going interstate.
Because there's a chance that if a slight case of COVID comes up, they're going to shut it very fast.
The consumer watchdog has seen soaring complaints during COVID about the travel industry not refunding bookings.
One of the things that we are saying to consumers is, look, be really careful when you're booking at the moment. We know that things can change.
Ryan is only booking a one-way ticket to the Gold Coast to see his family.
Because I just don't know what's going to happen when I get there.
At least if he gets stuck, he'll be near a beach. Emilia Terzon, ABC News.
To finance now, and the local share market followed the US market higher today, and the Australian dollar pushed ahead as well. Here's Alan Kohler.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average hit 30,000 last night for the first time, which prompted President Trump to call a press conference and take credit for it, even though he's been fired. And he called it a sacred number, so perhaps a holy trinity of 10,000s or something. Anyway, markets everywhere had another good session, but a couple of things to note about the Dow at 30,000. The Dow Jones average measures the share price of 30 large companies, and they're up 11.6% so far this month. But the Russell 2000 index, which measures small caps, is up more, 18%. The Spanish market has gone up the most, nearly 24% so far this month. Japan's rise is 14%, the UK's 13.7%, and the world index is up about the same as the Dow. Second, before 1988, 90% of the share market's performance came from economic growth. After that, it's been mostly lower wages boosting profits. Basically, the share market got divorced from the economy, which is why it's flying now when the economy is struggling from the pandemic. And here's another view of that. Labour productivity versus workers' real hourly pay. The gap between them is profits, and that's what the share market is floating on. The Australian market rose 0.5% today, and once again it was all about banks and resources stocks. Oil had another solid rise. The oil price has now gone up 23% this month because of the news about vaccines. And the Australian dollar pushed higher as well. Now it's 73.5 US cents. Oh, and finally, not everything is rising. The price of cheddar cheese is melting because of new lockdowns in Europe and the US, which means no cheeseburgers or nachos for a while. And that's finance.
Darwin residents were treated to a display in the skies this afternoon. A formation of hornets flew over the city and conducted a low-level fly-past along the Darwin coastline before making their way back to the Tyndall RAAF base. The Defence Department says the hornets will become less common in top-end skies in the future as they're being progressively retired to make way for the new F-35A. After a scaled-down event in Darwin this year, the supercars are revving up for 2021. For the first time, Australian superbikes will join the supercars for the Darwin Triple Crown next June. The Transporter Convoy and Concert will also make a comeback after being scrapped this year because of the pandemic.
A massive part of our sport is obviously the fan engagement, and I felt really bad this year that we had so many fans on the hill and I saw so many of our team shirts out there, but we weren't actually able to go and sign stuff for them, go and meet them and go and have a chat to them. So really excited to get back to normal in that instance.
NT Major Events says the weekend normally injects about $16 million into the local economy, but isn't sure what this year's figure was. The Sydney to Hobart yacht race is just 4 weeks away, but the pandemic means the harbour spectacle will be very different this year. With international travel restricted, crews are in short supply and the fleet is almost half of its usual size.
Putting on the Sydney to Hobart looked near impossible just a few months ago.
We were really thinking things were bad in March, April, like most people. And we've just really quickly just put it all back together and kind of got ready for the race.
But coronavirus means 2020's Blue Water Classic will look very different. Just 2 Supermaxis are competing for line honours. Infotrack came second out of 5 last year.
We're very happy. The odds are probably better than we've ever had before, I think, so we're looking forward to it.
The entire fleet's been whittled down to just 89 yachts. Ichiban's crew wants to take out the overall champion for a second year running.
No boat's either gone back-to-back wins since Freya in 1965, so it's an enormous challenge for us and the crew.
Social distancing is an impractical challenge, but COVID rules still apply.
There's certainly protocols that we're putting in place, so we're not sharing any utensils, things like that.
Another big first is introducing a 2-handed division for yachts with just 2 sailors.
It's going to be tough. It's a tough race normally with a full crew, so we're going to have to be really careful with our sleep management because you never sleep on the way to Hobart.
19 entries are double-handed, a voyage that will take 5 days, while the front runners finish in less than 2. These vantage points on North Head would usually draw thousands of spectators on Boxing Day, but this year big crowds aren't allowed. So fans are instead being urged to watch the race online. Chloe Hart, ABC News, Sydney.
Degrees in Darwin and on the Tiwis, 39 in Jabiru. It was sunny and dry across much of the south, very hot in the centre, with a top of 43 degrees at Rabbit Flat and 39 in Alice Springs. Point Fawcett on the Tiwi Islands topped the 24-hour rain list with 22 millimetres, 18 fell at Channel Point. Earlier today, the Murganella airstrip in the Daly district got the most rain, collecting 18 millimetres. Around Australia today, temperatures were up in most capitals, reaching 35 degrees in Adelaide, 31 in Melbourne, Sydney 25. On the satellite, there's scattered storm activity over the tropics and eastern Queensland. A trough extends from Western Australia across the Territory and into southeast Queensland. Interstate tomorrow, a cool change for Melbourne, warm in Canberra and sunny weather for Sydney and Perth. To our north, rain ahead for Jakarta, Denpasar and Dili, cloudy in Denpasar. A cool 22 tonight in Alice Springs, hot again tomorrow with a top of 39, very hot in the Barkly, 43 for Tennant Creek. Staying hot and dry in the northeast, 41 for Katherine and Bulletin, 43 in Borroloola. Chance of rain and storms again for the far north, 35 the top for Darwin, 36 in Wadair. There'll be a high tide of almost 6 metres at 20 past 4 in the Arvo, with westerly winds to 15 knots off the coast. The sun will be up tomorrow at 10 past 6 and sunset will be at 2 minutes to 7. And looking ahead for Darwin, warm and humid days and nights with a chance of rain in the afternoon and evening. In Alice Springs, staying very hot through to the weekend with southeasterly winds continuing all week. And to stay up to date with the latest news from the Northern Territory, head to our website, news.abc.net.au, and set your location as the NT. And stay with us now. Lee Sales is up next with 7:30.